Welcome to the City of Lodi Storm Drain Detectives program. We're excited to have each of you be a part of this year's program. And you are a part of a proud tradition of citizen monitors who have been doing this since 2001. If you live around Lodi, you know that the Mokelumne River is literally intertwined in our community. We've become dependent on it, but so many times we take it for granted. Its beneficial uses to us include recreation, boating, swimming, canoeing, fishing. And it's also an important part of our ecosystem, a natural habitat for local birds, fish, plants. But it's also widely used for agriculture, to water the vineyards and orchards in our area. And it's also a very important part of our drinking water system, both indirectly through groundwater and directly for the citizens of Lodi. Because of these various uses of the river, it is vital that we protect this river, and so that all of us can enjoy the beneficial uses that it offers. So that is where you come in. You're like a detective, testing the condition of this river to see how it's holding up and how the city's stormwater runoff is affecting it. You see, city planners and engineers rely heavily on the data that you are collecting, as well as the state of California. It gives them an important insight into the health of this river. So it's important that the data be reliable and dependable, because this data is going to be used for many different purposes. So you've been provided a kit with data sheets to record your data on. What we want you to do is use these data sheets. And so what we're asking you to do while you're monitoring are some of the following things. First off, we want you to be safe. Dress appropriately. If it's cold and rainy out, then be prepared for that. If it's hot, then be prepared for that. Use safe footwear, something that's not going to slip, something that your feet are going to be protected in. So safety is number one. The other thing is that we want you to pay attention to details. When you're recording data, use the data sheet. And on the back of the data sheet are some very helpful tips. Down here is a grading system for you to be able to check the data you're getting to see if it's even within the realm of reasonableness. There's also good references for dissolved oxygen. So use this data sheet. Follow the instructions that you've been given by your teachers and by those that are supervising this activity. There are in this kit various test kits that you will be trained to do to calibrate. And so we want you to do that. And then record your data in the monitoring book. We want you to write legibly. It's very important that we be able to understand the data that you've recorded. And double check it, just to make sure you haven't transposed a number or mixed something up. If you don't understand something, ask questions. We want you to understand this process and the significance of what you are doing. All right, detectives, now we're going to go over some of the tools in your water quality investigation toolkit. The very first thing that you need to do is you need to document everything that you test or calibrate. You have two items in this toolkit that are very important. The first one is this instrumentation calibration records. Anytime you calibrate an instrument or use it, you must record that information on this book. The second item you will find in your toolkit is the QAP, or the Quality Assurance Project Plan. This describes all of the procedures and the quality control considerations that you need to take while testing the water. One of the analysis that you might be asked to do is for dissolved oxygen. What is dissolved oxygen? Dissolved oxygen is the amount of oxygen that is in the water itself. Fish, aquatic plants, all need oxygen in order to survive. Without oxygen, they die. So it's very important that a healthy water body has a sufficient amount of oxygen. And so we're going to have you test for dissolved oxygen using one of two methods. The first method is using this YSI dissolved oxygen instrument. It has a probe that must be calibrated before you use it, and you will use this directly in the water that you're testing, typically at about mid-depth. And it will give you a readout in parts per million. The second way of measuring dissolved oxygen is using this test kit. In this case, you will take a sample of the water that you want to test, place it in here, following the instructions, add various reagents to it, and then compare the resulting color to this colorimetric code or standard, which comparing it to will tell you how many parts per million of dissolved oxygen there is in that sample. The next test that you might be asked to do is for nitrates. Nitrates is a nutrient that may be found in the water. It comes from agricultural runoff, from dairies or from livestock. It can come from fertilizers, and in an urban setting may come from fertilizers being used on landscaping. So to test for nitrates, you have a test kit where you will take a sample of the water, add some reagents to it, and then you will compare the resulting color to a colorimetric chart. And that will tell you how many parts per million of nitrate you have. pH is a measure of how acidic or alkaline the receiving water is. A healthy water body needs to be right around 7, a neutral pH. If the water is too acidic or too caustic or alkaline, it will harm fish and aquatic wildlife. So there's two ways that you may be asked to test for pH. The first one and the most accurate is using a pH probe like this one, where after calibrating it, you will dip it straight into the water, if it's safe to do so, and take a reading. To calibrate this, you will want to follow the instructions, but there are convenient buffers, packages and envelopes for testing it. Some of you may be asked to take a quick test of the pH using a color chart or a color strip. By dipping this into the water, it will roughly tell you what the pH of the receiving water is. Another test that you might be asked to do is for total dissolved solids, or called TDS. Total dissolved solids is the measure of solids that have dissolved into water. For instance, salts or sugars. And total dissolved solids can be measured using this field instrument, where you dip the instrument right into the water and you take a reading. It will measure in parts per million. And finally, a test that you might be asked to take is for turbidity. Turbidity is a measure of how clear the water is. The more turbid the water, the more cloudy or hard to see through it is. The less turbid, the more clear it is. There are two instruments that you might be asked to use. Both work on the same principle, in which a sample of the river water is collected in this vial. Then it is placed in the instrument, and the instrument shines a light through it. The more light that bounces back means the sample is more turbid or has more solids in it. The more light that passes straight through it and does not bounce back, it means the water is more clear or less turbid. And turbidity is measured in NTUs. So detectives, you can see the data is very important. And so we want you to really pay attention to what you're doing this year. And remember, this is not the last time you're going to take a look at this data. You're going to actually look at this later in the year, all of it, and tell us all what you think it means. You're going to look at the trends and evaluate it and tell us what does it mean for the City of Lodi and the Mokelumne River. So we want you to have fun, we want you to learn something, we want you to be safe, but most of all, we want you to enjoy this beautiful environment we all share here at City of Lodi. Thank you for being a part of this proud tradition.